Double busy, getting busy, do. Yo, what's up, It's me, the Double Busy. This is going to be a playthrough of Björn Ironside, son of Ragnar Lothbrok. The whole point of this playthrough is to get from an independent Norse tribal ruler to a feudal ruler. Off to the side of the playthroughs and the AARs, I'm kind of doing like a little mini-series on how does it work, how certain mechanics work. For example, I did one on the Confederate partition. Well, the big one in my mind is how do you get from the tribal government into a feudal government? Now, obviously, one of the ways is you can be tribal, but your liege can be feudal, so you can enter feudal through a decision to follow your liege. But it's not just the click of a button. There are some requirements for it. And then going from an independent Norse ruler who is tribal all the way through feudal is even harder than that one. So I want to actually do it. I want to play through it. I want to see exactly how hard it is to do all the different things and check all the different boxes you need to. Before we do a rundown of Björn and his family, his lifestyle, all his decisions and all his different aspects in his lands, let's go ahead and take a look at what it takes to adopt feudal ways. For Upland to keep expanding and developing, we must leave the old ways behind and adopt a new method of governance together. So the reason I am so interested in feudal is because in the tribal system, you only get the one holding. So let's say, for example, you are here in Upland and you click on the county. You have 4 holdings, plenty of slots for buildings, but you can't build in any of these. You can't construct because, again, you're in tribal, you're not in feudal. So if we're going to have gameplays where you're in a single county and you fill up that county as much as possible, then you're going to have to build in holdings. Well, in order to build in holdings, you have to be in feudal. And another part of that is the succession laws, right? So if you're in Confederate partition or regular partition, you are stuck with having all your counties split up. So the best you can really hope for is to be like a jarl or a king, that your heir will get the jarldom and then also get the primary county attached to that. Okay, another good example would be over here in Rurik, 6 holdings. But in tribal, you're only getting to build in one of them. So wouldn't it be great to be able to get to feudal, be able to build all 6 of those holdings? You could probably control somewhere around 4 or 5 of those if you have pretty good stewardship. You could have, say, 1 bishopric and 1 city, and then the rest would be all castles that you would control. So then you wouldn't have to worry in Confederate partition or regular partition about trying to get only a single heir or trying to eliminate heirs or any of the workarounds that you try to do to make sure that your heir gets more than 1 county. It's fine if they only get 1 county because they're going to be stacked in that 1 county. And then you're not going to have to go up here and try to find the other ways of succession, the special successions like the electives. So the effects are that it changes your government to feudal. That's what we want. All tribal holdings in the realm will become castle holdings. So when you click over here and it says your tribe holding, instead of it looking kind of like a little tent, it's just going to turn into a castle. And then when you're zoomed in close and hovering over it, it will say castle also. My tribal vassals will change to feudalism. So your vassals are going to eventually follow you and switch over to feudalism as well. Okay, requirements. You have the law absolute tribal authority. So in realm, at the top is your tribal authority. And if you're an independent ruler, meaning you do not have a liege, you have to get all the way up here to get high tribal authority so that you can settle becoming feudal. A satru is an organized faith. Okay, it doesn't have to be a satru, it's whatever your faith is. So I'll talk about different ways to do that. But since Björn is Norse asatru, then he would have to reform the faith. And that takes a lot of steps. Level of fame is distinguished, level 2 or above. That's actually going to be pretty easy considering all the other things we have to do to check all these boxes. So don't worry too much about that one. The development level in the chiefdom of Upland is greater or equal to 10. So when they're saying the chiefdom of Upland, it's the county. I'm thinking that whatever your capital county is the one that's going to have development 10. It's at 3 in A67, which is actually pretty far along. Most of these are like at 0 or 1. So that's pretty good, but it's also going to take a very long time to grow this. And there's a few different actions or lifestyle perks you can follow to try to increase that development. Last but certainly not least, has all tribal era innovations. So when you click on your culture, all the tribal era innovations have to be had. Not the ones down here, not the extra ones, but just the ones that are kind of like required, basically, the non-optional ones. And you can verify that by going into the 1066 start date, where the Irish have feudal, but they don't have any of the innovations down here at the bottom, and they're already on their way into early medieval. So now what I want to show you is basically the 3-column tree map that I made to help myself figure out what in the world's going on for an independent Norse ruler to go from tribal to feudal in that decision. So the 3 main boxes that you have to check are the absolute tribal authority law, the organized faith, and the all tribal innovations. For now, I'm going to jump in the game and talk about these with the game mechanics and the game visuals, but if you want me to do a little rundown of this, just stay until the end of the video, and I'll go through this line by line, item by item. I discussed how you have to have absolute tribal authority in order to switch to feudal as an independent ruler. So that means we're going to have to spend a lot of prestige to get through each of these levels, 342, 342, 342, and you're going to have to wait the 10 years in between when you do it. So if you go ahead and pass that law, now it's going to take 10 more years for you to do it the next time. Okay, obviously you need a lot of prestige to be able to do that. So let's look up here and see, how do we get prestige? We talked about things like being the head of your house or dynasty, how many counties and duchies you hold, special traits, actions by your counselors, what kind of penalties you can get from concubines and spouses, traits. Being unreformed actually helps gain prestige because the tribal governments are based on prestige for raising men-at-arms regiments. And then if we look at diplomacy, the majesty focus, there's prestige. And we go down the August route, you can see that there's prestige for dread, for knights, commissioning an epic, and you get flat out more prestige per month. And then last but not least, your chancellor can do the foreign affairs, which gives you prestige by spreading the word to foreign rulers. And then that will trigger events that will also give you little chunks of prestige if they're good at their job. Alright, let's take a look at the faiths. So you could convert to a faith that's already organized, but that's going to be expensive, and obviously it's going to get you in a lot of trouble with your vassals and your family and their opinion. You could try to do something that's kind of closer to yours. Insular, for example, costs a lot less, apparently because it has some things that are closer to a Satru. And another one is Mahayana, which is way over here. Where'd it go? Right there. There's Mahayana. Now, if you want to reform the faith, then there's a whole bunch of things that you have to do, and it gets very expensive very fast. But you can see where your sites are. So if you're Norse Asatru, if you're a Satru faith, 1, 2, 3 of these are already controlled by the same faith. It would just be a matter of conquesting, subjugating, or vassalizing them. Or you could do conquests for these ones independently and try to hold them from the Catholics. Another interesting one is Rurik, where you could switch to being Sumanusko, and you can get 1, 2, 3 sites pretty quickly, pretty easily. Another one's decently close, and then this one's like way over there. So knowing players want to play a lot of Vikings, or they like playing Rurik, I think those are going to be 2 very popular choices. In order to reform the faith, you have to have 3 holy sites, a bunch of piety, and then you're going to have to change some of the doctrines and the tenets in it. Okay, so you can see where your holy sites are based on your religion. You're going to have to do wars or vassalize, and then you're going to have a ton of piety. But if you go with the learning lifestyle and the theology focus, you're going to get a lot of piety that way. Then if you go down the theologian tree, you're going to get more piety that way too. So religious relations efficiency goes up, priest opinions are going up, so they might give you a little bit of piety that way. You're getting piety per night here with profit. Notice the Reformation cost, minus 50%, so it cuts the cost in half. That is huge. You get some more piety here, and then you'll get more piety there. Other things you can do to get a lot of piety include going on a pilgrimage. And again, the farther you go, the more dangerous it is, sort of, a little bit, but also the more piety you're going to get and a little bit more expensive. You can also declare a war for capturing prisoners, and then you'll get piety out of the war, but you'll also get piety for executing those prisoners, because that's part of the religion here. Executions earn piety instead of costing piety. For a counselor, whoever the realm priest is can do religious relations. That's going to get you some piety every month. Your own learning skill gives you a little bit of piety, and however much your spouse assists you is going to help also. And then, similar to what I said about prestige, how there are some traits that can give you prestige, virtuous traits are going to give you piety. Alright, another aspect of going feudal is the cultural innovations. So, let's go back and look at that. Your culture, part of the Northern Germanic group, culture head is you, because Bjorn is. And it tells you what era you're in, and it kind of gives you a quick rundown. There's a base progress for each of the innovations. Average development of Norse counties. You can't really control that much. You can up your counties and try to have that spread throughout the neighboring counties, but that just gives you an idea of what's going on. Basically, you can't cheese it and make cultural innovations just in your own lands. You have to get all the other lands to catch up with you, culture-wide. And then if you choose it as your focus or your fascination, you're getting a ton more. In order to be the cultural head, you have to be the ruler that has the most counties of that culture. So Bjorn automatically starts with 12, and he's the most. It's going to be pretty hard for any of these other rulers to get that high, especially when he's going to be spreading and getting bigger, and eventually becoming the king of Sweden. For Rurik, he's actually not the largest. There's somebody down here. I think it's this guy right here. Yeah. Has the most Russian counties. But, given that you're going to be expanding and warring and conquesting and subjugating, that could actually change pretty quick. Okay, you have to have all of the ones in military and all the ones in civic. You do not have to have any of the weird regional ones, any of the extras. As far as lifestyles go, you can be in the learning lifestyle. You can pick the scholarship focus to increase learning, and there's development growth right there. And then you can go down the scholar tree, and there are some things related to development in there. So you have cultural fascination progress, but you have to be the cultural head. Increased development in county. 20% counselor's primary skills are added to your own. And then development growth. Obviously, your learning skill has an effect on how fast the development progresses. You go stewardship, and I don't think any of these particularly matter, but you go in architect. You can get all the way to centralization, and there's development growth in realm capital. When you pick a lifestyle, you have to get through about 2 or 3 before you can change anyway. Do the learning ones first, because that's going to be the most benefits, the most stacking over your life, and then add this little bit on at the end if you want to. Obviously, your counselor can increase development. Unfortunately, for tribal governments, you're going to get a pretty big penalty. So all this stuff is green. You're like, hey, it looks good. But existing development, minus 0.2. So you're like, okay, you're a little bit developed already compared to all your neighbors. But there's the big penalty right there for tribal government. And last but certainly not least, some of the cultural innovations actually directly contribute to development growth. For example, currency. Right, now that we know all those things, really focus on all of those and see what it's going to take to take ourselves from tribal into the feudal government. And it's, in a way, it's kind of min-maxing, but at the same time, we're getting to roleplay because we're using the lifestyle perks, we're using our counselor actions, we're using the mechanics of the game to do something that's focused. And you can pretend that, hey, you know, my character understands what's going on in the world or is smart enough to realize that our tribal ways just aren't going to work for the foreseeable future. You know, the Catholics and the heathens have figured out how to build bigger and more castles to get more resources out of their lands, to get more troops, to get more levies, to get more men-at-arms, to get more taxes, and basically how to be so much more developed and have so many more technologies that they're going to eventually overrun us. So that's kind of the role-playing aspect, or the role-playing angle that you have to take in order to think about it that way. All right, this is going to be a big long one, so it's going to be fun and interesting along the way. I am going to play in Iron Man mode, so hey, you know, Bjorn could end up in a war and get killed, and it could just throw everything off. Or, you know, he could have like 20 children who go on to do great things, so we'll find out. Okay, in the next video, we'll quickly run through all the day one activities and choices that we have to make to get things started, and then we'll unpause the game and finally start rolling on towards our feudal future. Double busy, getting busy, Okay, now, if you have a liege who is feudal, then you can do it at limited or above, so you don't have to go as high. If you're doing this as an independent ruler, you have to wait 10 years in between level increases. So, if you're all the way down at level 1, you change to level 2, 10 years, level 3, 10 years, and then level 4, absolute. It's going to take 30 years for you to get from level 1 to level 4. That's a long time for any ruler to rule. Also remember that high or absolute authority affects direct vassal opinion. So if you get all the way to level 3 high, that's a -10 opinion modifier. And if you get all the way to absolute tribal authority, it's a -30. But I'm hoping that when I get to the end and all of these are done, that -30 will last a very, very short time, and then I switch over to feudal. You're also going to need about 1,500 prestige to spend to do all of those transitions between the levels. And like we said earlier, you need a level of fame to be distinguished, which is 2. But that's only like an extra 1,000 prestige over what like Beer and Ironside has, for example. So you're going to be getting that anyway. Don't worry too much about the level of fame, but you do need a decent amount of prestige to spend to increase each of those levels every 10 years. Here are some ways to get a lot of prestige. And I tried to put them in order of what I think you have like the most control over or what's going to get you the most points the fastest. So one of them is the Chancellor's Foreign Affairs action. There are lifestyle perks, and one of those would be Diplomacy, going down the Majesty Focus, and the August Tree of Perks. There's one about Dread in there, and then you can also like kind of synergize that Dread with other things. So if you go Martial, Authority, Overseer, there's some bonuses for Dread to Prestige. And if you go Intrigue, Intimidation, Torturer, somewhere in there is a bonus to Prestige also. So if you kind of cross all 3 of those, if you're able to do that, you're going to get tons and tons of Prestige. You can get extra Prestige from Knights. For example, if you're in the Martial group, doesn't really matter which of the 3 focuses, but you pick the Gallant tree, that's going to give you bonuses to Prestige. Powerful vassals on the council. If you're in the Diplomacy, not only do the Knights give you, but the powerful vassals on the council give you some extra Prestige. Getting all the way to the August trait will give you extra Prestige. And commissioning an epic will give you extra Prestige. You can do that every 10 years, and it looks like you probably get somewhere around 150 Prestige. So it's actually not a lot every 10 years, but every little bit helps. Another path you can go down is the Diplomacy, Majesty, Family Hierarchy, or Family Hierarch. If you get a lot of friends, there are some perks that give you random skills, and you might end up increasing your learning skill. Or you could go into the learning lifestyle and become Scholar, and there's a little bit in there related to friends and skills. Other ways to gain prestige, obviously you can raid and declare wars and win wars. You can get allies and fight their wars, or you can join holy wars. There are decisions that can give you prestige, such as the hunt. The more holdings you have, the more prestige you can get, but you're kind of limited based on your stewardship and your spouse's contribution. Concubines and spouses obviously help with prestige, but it's more about having enough, so you don't get the penalty for not having enough of those. There are traits that give you prestige. I think one of them might be like bravery, kind of contributes to your prestige. And then if you're the house or the dynasty head, or both, you get a little bit of extra prestige too. But if you calculate out the math, it's not quite as much as some of these other choices. So, that's the first part. Not necessarily the first thing you're going to do, but the first part to talk about. Absolute tribal authority. You need a lot of prestige, so you can work your way up through the levels every 10 years. Okay, next up, organized faith. One idea is to kind of cheese the system and convert to a faith that's already organized. So if you're Norse, a Satru, you can convert to Insular or Mahayana for only about 1,000 piety. All the others cost around 2,000 or more, so they start getting really expensive. But if you do that, only you are converting, not all your people and not all your vassals. The other way to do it is to just completely reform the faith, but of course that's going to take a long time. You or a vassal has to hold 3+ holy sites, and I verified that vassal works because I played a short game as Rurik. I went and conquered a total of 3 holy sites by switching to Sumanusko, and then I gave away one of the holy sites to my son as a vassal, and it still worked. It was still available. Obviously, you can do this through wars, or you might be able to vassalize the person that's holding that county if they're your neighbor. You're also going to need about 2,500 piety to spend, but you can cut that in half if you go for the prophet perk, which I'll talk about in just a second. So if you go in the learning lifestyle, theology focus, and the theologian tree, there's a perk in there called prophet, and it literally says that it cuts the cost of reformation in half. It also gives you bonuses for knights, which again ties back into what we were saying over here in the diplomacy lifestyle. There's a trait called theologian that helps give you piety. There are some perks in there that just flat out give you piety or more percentage piety. Your realm priest can do the religious relations action and get you some piety that way. You can go on a pilgrimage and give you the pilgrim trait. So both of those you'll get a chunk of piety for pilgrimage, and the longer you go, the more you get. It's actually quite a bit. I did a pilgrimage to the farthest one away I could find, which I think was in Zealand, and it gave 650 piety. Of course, he got sick along the way, so hey, you could die on the way during your pilgrimage, but that's the risk you take. You could do raid wars for captives, because you'll get piety for winning or even surrendering, piecing out. Or, actually surrendering also. You can get piety for surrendering in a raid for captive wars. A war for captives. You also get some piety from executing the prisoners that you get. And if you're going for this whole dread tyranny route, that's going to be a lot of fun for you. Your realm priest can take the religious relations. We already talked about that with the learning tree. Your learning skill gives you piety, so yourself and your spouse's contribution if you set them to help you. And then there are traits that give you piety as well. Okay, the third part of this is having all tribal innovations. So one factor is the development rate, and that is what's average in all Norse counties. That's going to be insanely difficult to control. So basically you're just going to try to focus on your realm and your holdings the best that you can. It says that you have to have development in your capital county be 10 plus, 10 or higher. So 10 is quite a bit. One way you can do this is if you are the cultural head, then you get to choose your fascination. And that means that you would have to be the ruler with the most culture counties. So that's why Bjorn Ironside is a good one for the Norse, because he's already the one who has the most counties. Any of the others, it's going to be plenty of wars and conquests to try to gain the most counties. Even if you start out as Rurik in the Russian culture, and say you switch over to like Sumanusko, you're still going to have to conquer several counties just to become the culture head. But you would also, of course, have to switch to the Russian culture as him. You'd have to take that decision. In the learning lifestyle, there is a scholarship focus, and there is a scholar tree. There's a perk in there called scientific, and that helps with your cultural fascination progress, but you have to be the cultural head for that to have any effect. There's also planned cultivation, where your steward can increase development in county. So basically it makes that action more effective for your steward. And then there's also learn on the job, which makes your counselor skills increase. So they get better at their jobs, and then their skills contribute to your skills, making you more learned. There is also a scholar trait, which improves development. Your learning skill, yourself and whatever your spouse contributes, automatically contributes to development in your counties. If you set your spouse to help you in that area, it'll give you even a little bit more of a bonus. If you go with the stewardship lifestyle, doesn't matter which of the focus is, but you go on the architect tree, there's a perk called Centralization, and that helps with realm capital development. So you can use stewardship a little bit for that. The steward can take the action to increase development in the county, but there's actually a pretty big tribal penalty for that, so don't rely too much on this while you're in tribal. And then there are other cultural innovations, for example, currency, that actually feed back into increasing development. So next, I think we're going to jump into the game, and we'll kind of look at these in the game menus, and then we can start playing.